Marcus Williams drove slowly down Pine Street for the first time as a homeowner. He had driven this street many times before during his patrol rounds, but today was different. Today, this was his street. His new home sat at the end of the block, a nice colonial house with white shutters and a small front porch. He parked his personal car in the driveway and sat for a moment. 22 years. That's how long it took him to get here. 22 years of working double shifts, saving every penny, and climbing up through the police department ranks. At 45 years old, Marcus was the youngest police chief his city had ever had. More importantly, he was the first black police chief in the city's history. The house wasn't huge, but it was his. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a nice backyard where he could finally have that garden his mother always wanted him to grow. The neighborhood was called Willowbrook Heights. It was known for having well-kept lawns, quiet streets, and families who took pride in their homes. Marcus got out of his car and looked around. The street was lined with similar houses, each with perfect lawns and clean driveways. Children's bikes were parked neatly in some yards. Basketball hoops stood over garage doors. It looked like the kind of place where kids could play outside, safely, and neighbors knew each other's names. He had worked hard to afford a home in a neighborhood like this. Growing up in the rough part of town, Marcus had seen too many good kids go down the wrong path because they had no safe place to call home. He promised himself that when he had children of his own someday, they would grow up somewhere different, somewhere safe, somewhere with good schools and caring neighbors. The moving truck arrived right on time. Marcus had kept his belongings simple over the years. He didn't own much furniture, but everything he had was good quality. His grandmother's dining room table, his father's favorite chair, books about law enforcement and leadership that filled 2 whole boxes, pictures of his family and his graduation from the police academy. As he started directing the movers, Marcus noticed a woman watching from across the street. She stood in her front yard, holding a watering can but not actually watering anything. She was about 60 years old with perfectly styled gray hair and wore a pink sweater even though it was warm outside. The woman walked across the street with a big smile. "Hello there, I'm Patricia Hendricks. I live right across from you. Welcome to Willowbrook Heights." Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans and reached out to shake her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Hendricks. I'm Marcus Williams." Patricia's smile seemed to get smaller for just a second, but then it returned. "Oh, how wonderful. Are you renting or buying?" "I bought the house," Marcus said. "Just closed on it yesterday." "That's nice," Patricia said, but her tone had changed, slightly. "And what kind of work do you do, Mr. Williams?" Marcus had learned over the years that people sometimes had strong reactions when they found out he was a police officer. Some people got nervous, others became overly friendly. He decided to keep it simple for now. "I work in public safety," he said. Patricia nodded slowly. "I see. Well, I should mention that I'm the president of our homeowners association. We have some guidelines here that help keep our neighborhood looking nice. I'd be happy to give you a copy of the rules." "That would be great," Marcus said. "I want to be a good neighbor." "Wonderful." Patricia's smile returned to full brightness. "I'll bring them by tomorrow." "Oh, and we have a neighborhood barbecue every 4th of July. You'll have to come and meet everyone." As Patricia walked back across the street, Marcus noticed she turned around twice to look at him. He shrugged it off and went back to helping the movers. The rest of the afternoon went smoothly. Marcus's new neighbors on either side came by to introduce themselves. The Johnson family lived to his left. They had 2 young children who peeked shyly from behind their mother's legs. The elderly Mr. Peterson lived to his right and brought over a plate of cookies his wife had made. "Been in this neighborhood for 30 years, Mr. Peterson said. It's a good place to live, quiet, safe. Hope you'll be happy here." "Thank you, sir," Marcus said. "I'm sure I will be." That evening, Marcus sat on his front porch with a cup of coffee. The street was quiet except for the sound of sprinklers and someone mowing their lawn a few houses down. A jogger ran by and waved. A family walked their dog and called out, "Good evening." This was exactly what he had worked for, a peaceful place where he could come home after dealing with the worst parts of human nature all day. A place where he could sit on his porch and watch the world go by without worrying about crime or violence or the heavy responsibilities that came with his job. His phone buzzed with a text from his lieutenant. "How's the new house, Chief?" Marcus typed back. "Perfect. Exactly what I needed." And it was perfect. The house was solid and well built. The neighborhood was quiet and clean. His neighbors seemed friendly enough. Patricia Hendricks was a little intense, but every neighborhood had someone who cared maybe a little too much about the rules. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Marcus finished his coffee and went inside. He had a lot of unpacking to do, and tomorrow he would start his first full week as a resident of Willowbrook Heights. He hung up his uniform in the bedroom closet, right next to the civilian clothes he wore, on his days off. In the morning, he would put on that uniform and drive to work, where he would make decisions that affected thousands of people in his city. But here, in this house, on this street, he was just Marcus Williams, a new neighbor who wanted to mow his lawn on Saturdays, maybe plant some flowers in the spring, and wave to the people who lived around him. He had no idea that some of those people had already decided he didn't belong there. He had no idea that Patricia Hendricks was already making phone calls to other neighbors, asking questions about the new resident, and expressing concerns about those people moving into their neighborhood. Marcus fell asleep that first night, in his new home feeling hopeful about the future. He dreamed about family barbecues in his backyard and helping neighborhood kids with their homework. He dreamed about being part of a community. He would soon learn that not everyone in Willowbrook Heights shared those same dreams. Marcus woke up early on his first Monday morning in Willowbrook Heights. He had always been an early riser, but today he wanted to see what his new neighborhood looked like in the morning. He made coffee and stepped out onto his front porch still, wearing his pajamas and robe. The street was already busy. People were getting into their cars to go to work. Children waited at the corner for the school bus. A few neighbors were walking their dogs or jogging. It felt like the kind of neighborhood he had always imagined living in. Marcus waved to Mr. Peterson, who was getting his newspaper from the driveway. The old man waved back and called out, "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" "Sure is," Marcus replied. But as Marcus stood there drinking his coffee, he noticed something strange. People kept looking at him. Not just quick glances, but long stares. A woman jogging by slowed down as she passed his house and looked right at him. Two men talking by their mailboxes stopped their conversation and turned to look in his direction. Marcus looked down at himself. Maybe pajamas and a robe weren't the right thing to wear outside, even on his own porch. He went back inside to get ready for work. An hour later, Marcus was dressed in his police uniform and walking to his car. He always felt proud putting on the uniform. It represented everything he had worked for and all the people he had sworn to protect and serve. As he opened his car door, he heard someone call his name. "Mr. Williams, Mr. Williams." Marcus turned to see Patricia Hendricks hurrying across the street. She was carrying a folder and moving as fast as her high heels would allow. "Good morning, Mrs. Hendricks," Marcus said. Patricia stopped and looked at his uniform. Her eyes went wide and her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out for a few seconds. "You're a police officer," she finally said. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied. "I see." Patricia's voice sounded different than it had the day before, less friendly, more careful. What kind of police officer?" Marcus wasn't sure why that was an important question, but he answered anyway. "I'm the chief of police." Patricia's face went completely pale. She clutched the folder against her chest and took a small step backward. "The chief of police," she repeated slowly. "That's right," Marcus said. "Is there something wrong?" No, Patricia said quickly. "Nothing wrong at all. I brought you those HOA rules I mentioned yesterday." She handed him the folder with shaking hands. Marcus noticed that her friendliness from the day before was completely gone. "Thank you," Marcus said. "I'll read through these tonight." "Yes, well, please make sure you do," Patricia said. Her voice was sharp now. "We take our rules very seriously here. Very seriously indeed." She hurried back across the street without saying goodbye. Marcus stood by his car for a moment, confused by the strange conversation Why did Patricia seem so upset to learn that he was a police officer? Most people were happy to have a cop living in their neighborhood. It usually made them feel safer. He shrugged and got into his car. Maybe Patricia was just having a bad morning. But as Marcus drove down Pine Street, he noticed more strange looks. Mrs. Martinez was watering her flowers and stopped to stare as he drove by. The teenage boy, who lived 3 houses down actually, pointed at his car and said something to his friend. At work, Marcus tried to forget about the odd morning. He had important meetings with the mayor and city council about the department's budget. He reviewed crime reports from the weekend and met with his senior officers about patrol schedules. But even at work, something felt different. His secretary, Linda, kept looking at him strangely. "Chief," she finally said around lunchtime, "is everything okay? You seem distracted today." "I moved into a new neighborhood yesterday," Marcus said. "Still getting used to it, I guess." "Where did you move to?" "Willowbrook Heights." Linda raised her eyebrows. "That's a nice area, expensive. Those HOA people can be pretty particular about things." "What do you mean?" "Oh, you know how some of those fancy neighborhoods can be. They have rules about everything. What color you can paint your house, what kind of mailbox you can have when you can put your trash out. Sometimes they go a little overboard." Marcus thought about Patricia's reaction that morning and her comment about taking the rules very seriously. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table and read through the HOA guidelines Patricia had given him. Most of the rules seemed reasonable. Keep your lawn mowed. Don't leave trash cans out too long after pickup day. Don't play loud music after 10 at night. But some of the rules seemed very specific and almost silly. Mailboxes had to be painted in one of 3 approved colors. Christmas decorations could only be displayed from December 1st through January 15th. Garden hoses had to be stored in the backyard, not the front yard. There were also rules about visitors and parking. Guests could only park on the street for 3 hours during the day and not at all overnight without special permission from the HOA board. Marcus looked around his house. Everything seemed to be in order. His lawn was neat. His mailbox was black, which was one of the approved colors. He didn't have any decorations up, and his garden hose was already stored in the backyard. The next morning, Marcus decided to introduce himself to more of his neighbors. He had Wednesday off, so he planned to spend the day settling in and being friendly. He started by washing his car in the driveway. It was a normal black sedan, nothing fancy, but he liked to keep it clean. As he washed, he noticed several neighbors watching him from their yards and windows. Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down walked by walking her small dog. She used to smile and wave when Marcus saw her during his patrol rounds, but today she looked nervous. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," Marcus called out. She looked startled, as if she hadn't expected him to know her name. "Oh," she said. "Good morning." She hurried past without stopping to chat. A few minutes later, the Johnson children from next door came outside to play in their backyard. Marcus could hear them laughing and playing, but when he looked over and waved, their mother quickly called them inside. That afternoon, Marcus decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. He wanted to learn the streets and see what was around him. As he walked, he noticed how quiet everything became. People who had been outside went inside. Children who had been playing in their yards were called home. By the time Marcus returned to his house, the street was almost completely empty. That evening, his next-door neighbor, Mr. Johnson, knocked on his door. "Mr. Williams," Johnson said when Marcus answered. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course," Marcus said. "Would you like to come in?" "No, this is fine," Johnson said quickly. He looked nervous and kept glancing around as if he was afraid someone might see him talking to Marcus. "I just wanted to let you know that some of the neighbors have been asking questions about you," Johnson said quietly. "What kind of questions?" "About your job, about whether you can afford to live here, about what kind of people you might have visiting." Johnson paused. "Look, I don't agree with any of this. My wife and I think you seem like a nice man, but I thought you should know that Patricia Hendricks has been calling people." Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach. "Calling people about what?" "She's concerned about property values. She thinks that certain types of people might bring down The neighborhood. Johnson couldn't meet Marcus's eyes when he said this. Marcus understood immediately what Johnson was trying to tell him without saying it directly. "I see," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry," Johnson said. "I really am. Like I said, my wife and I don't feel that way, but I thought you should know what you're dealing with." After Johnson left, Marcus sat on his porch in the darkness. The neighborhood was quiet and peaceful, just like he had wanted. But now he understood why people had been staring at him. Why Patricia had reacted so strangely when she learned he was a police officer. Why his neighbors seemed nervous around him. It wasn't because he was a cop. It was because he was a black man living in a neighborhood where some people didn't think he belonged. Marcus had dealt with racism throughout his career, but he had hoped that his new neighborhood would be different. He had hoped that in a place like this, people would judge him by his character and his actions, not by the color of his skin. As he sat in the darkness, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going anywhere. He had worked too hard and come too far to be intimidated by a few small-minded neighbors. He would be the best neighbor he could be. He would follow every HOA rule perfectly. He would kill them with kindness. But deep down, Marcus knew this was just the beginning of his problems in Willowbrook Heights. Marcus woke up Thursday morning to find a bright yellow note stuck to his front door. The paper fluttered in the morning breeze as he stepped outside to get his newspaper. The note was from the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. It was typed on official letterhead and signed by Patricia Hendricks. "Dear Mr. Williams," it read, "it has come to our attention that your lawn sprinklers were running past the allowed time yesterday evening. HOA rules state that sprinklers may only run between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. Please adjust your watering schedule immediately to comply with neighborhood standards." Marcus looked at his lawn. It was green and healthy, just like every other lawn on the Rye Street. He looked at his sprinkler timer, which was set to run from 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. every morning. The timer had been installed by the previous homeowner and had never run in the evening. He checked the timer 3 times to make sure he was reading it correctly. There was no evening setting. The sprinklers only ran for 30 minutes in the early morning, which was well within the HOA rules. Marcus folded the note and put it in his pocket. Someone had made a mistake. He would call Patricia later and explain about the timer. But when Marcus got home from work that evening, there was another yellow note on his door. This one complained about his garbage cans. Trash receptacles must be returned to their storage. Location within 12 hours of pickup, the note said. Your cans have been visible from the street for more than 24 hours. Marcus was confused. Trash pickup was on Wednesdays. He had put his cans out Tuesday night and brought them back in Wednesday evening after work. That was less than 24 hours, and well within the 12-hour rule. He walked around his house to double-check. His trash cans were neatly stored behind his garage, completely out of sight from the street. They had been there since Wednesday evening. Friday morning brought another note. This one said his car had been parked suspiciously in his own driveway. Residents are reminded that vehicles should be parked in garages when possible, the note read. Cars left in driveways for extended periods may attract unwanted attention to the neighborhood. Marcus had to read that note twice to believe it. His car was parked in his own driveway because his garage was still full of moving boxes he hadn't unpacked yet. How could parking in your own driveway be suspicious? By the following Tuesday, Marcus had received 6 more notes. One complained that his lawn was too green compared to his neighbors, suggesting he was using too much water or fertilizer. Another said that unfamiliar vehicles had been seen at his house, referring to the time his lieutenant had stopped by to drop off some work papers. The strangest note complained that Marcus had been seen pacing in his backyard, which might disturb the neighbors. Marcus had been measuring his yard to figure out where to plant his mother's vegetable garden. Marcus kept every note in a folder. His years as a police officer had taught him to document everything carefully. Each note was dated, photographed, and filed away. He tried calling Patricia Hendricks several times to discuss the complaints, but she never answered her phone. He tried stopping by her house, but she claimed to be too busy to talk. Meanwhile, Marcus noticed that his neighbors were watching him more closely than ever. When he mowed his lawn on Saturday morning, 3 different people found reasons to stand in their yards and observe him. When he checked his mailbox, curtains twitched in windows across the street. The surveillance was making Marcus uncomfortable, but he was determined not to let it show. He continued to wave and say hello to everyone he met. He followed every HOA rule perfectly. He even started keeping a daily log of his activities, noting when he watered his lawn, when he brought in his trash cans, and when he parked his car. 2 weeks after moving in, Marcus decided to attend his first HOA board meeting. The meeting was held in the community center at the entrance to the neighborhood. Marcus arrived a few minutes early and took a seat in the back row. The room fell silent when he walked in. About 20 neighbors were there, and every single one of them turned to stare at him. Marcus smiled and nodded, but no one smiled back. Patricia Hendricks called the meeting to order. She went through the usual business, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for landscaping the entrance, planning the annual 4th of July barbecue. Then she got to what she called new business. We need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about compliance with our neighborhood standards, Patricia said. Her eyes looked directly at Marcus as she spoke. We've had reports of excessive water usage, improper parking, and activities that don't fit with our community values, she continued. I want to remind everyone that these rules exist to protect our property values and maintain the character of our neighborhood. A man Marcus didn't recognize raised his hand. What kind of activities are we talking about? Patricia glanced at Marcus again. Well, we've had reports of people pacing around their backyards at odd hours, strangers coming and going at all times of day, cars parked where they shouldn't be parked. Marcus felt his face getting warm. Every complaint Patricia was describing applied to him, but every description was either wrong or made his normal activities sound sinister. Another neighbor, a woman with short blonde hair, raised her hand. Are we talking about the new resident? Patricia nodded. I don't like to single anyone out, but yes, we need to make sure that everyone understands our expectations here. Marcus stood up. The room got even quieter. Excuse me, he said politely. I'm Marcus Williams. I think you're talking about me. Patricia's face turned red. Mr. Williams, I didn't expect you to be here tonight. I live here, Marcus said. I thought I should come to the community meetings. The blonde woman looked directly at Marcus. Are you the one who's been having all those strange people over to your house? Marcus was confused. Strange people? We've seen different cars in your driveway. People we don't recognize. Marcus realized she was talking about his co-workers who had helped him move some furniture the previous weekend. Those were friends of mine helping me get settled, Marcus explained. They were only there for a few hours. What kind of friends? Another man asked. The question hung in the air. Marcus understood exactly what the man was really asking. Co-workers, Marcus said simply. What kind of work do you do? The blonde woman asked. Marcus had been avoiding this question for 2 weeks, but now seemed like the right time to answer it. I'm a police officer, he said. The room erupted in whispers and murmurs. People turned to each other with surprised expressions. Patricia Hendricks looked like she had swallowed something sour. What kind of police officer? I'm the chief of police for the city, Marcus said clearly. The whispering stopped completely. The room was dead silent. A man in the front row turned around to look at Marcus. You're Chief Williams? The new police chief who was in the newspaper last month? Yes, sir, Marcus said. The man's whole attitude changed. Chief Williams, I'm Tom Rodriguez. I work for the city planning department. I've heard great things about the changes you've been making at the police department. Suddenly, several people in the room were smiling at Marcus. A woman raised her hand and said, Chief Williams, my son is interested in becoming a police officer. Could he talk to you sometime about what it's like? But not everyone looked happy. Patricia Hendricks looked angry. The blonde woman was whispering urgently to the man sitting next to her. After the meeting, about half the neighbors came up to introduce themselves properly to Marcus. They apologized for not welcoming him sooner and invited him to neighborhood barbecues and game nights. But Patricia Hendricks left without speaking to him. So did several other neighbors who had been asking the suspicious questions earlier. As Marcus walked home, he felt a little better about his situation. At least now some of his neighbors knew who he really was. Maybe the complaints and the surveillance would stop now that people understood he was a law enforcement officer who had dedicated his life to protecting people. But Marcus was wrong. The complaints didn't stop. They got worse. The next morning there was another yellow note on his door. This one said that having too many police officers visiting the neighborhood was intimidating to families with children. Marcus had never had any police officers visit his house except for his lieutenant who had stopped by once. That's when Marcus realized that Patricia Hendricks and some of his other neighbors didn't care that he was a police officer. They didn't care about his character or his service to the community. They had already decided they didn't want him in their neighborhood, and they were going to keep trying to make his life miserable until he left. Marcus sat on his front porch that evening and looked up and down Pine Street. Children were playing in their yards, neighbors were walking their dogs and chatting with each other. It was exactly the kind of peaceful, safe neighborhood he had always wanted to live in. But for Marcus, Willowbrook Heights was starting to feel like anything but peaceful. He was beginning to understand that some battles couldn't be won with kindness and patience. Some people would never see past the color of his skin, no matter what he accomplished or how he behaved. The war for his place in Willowbrook Heights was just beginning. Marcus had been living in Willowbrook Heights for 6 weeks when he decided he needed a security camera. The decision came after he found his garbage scattered across his front lawn 3 mornings in a row. The first morning, Marcus thought maybe a raccoon or stray dog had gotten into his trash. He cleaned up the mess and secured the lids more tightly. The second morning, he began to suspect that something else was going on. By the third morning, when he found his personal papers and mail scattered everywhere, Marcus knew this wasn't an accident. He drove to the electronics store after work and bought a simple security camera system. Nothing fancy, just one camera that could record his front yard and driveway. Marcus had installed similar systems dozens of times during his police career when helping citizens protect their homes. The camera was small and positioned to only record his own property. Marcus made sure it couldn't see into any neighbor's yard or windows. He connected it to his home Wi-Fi and tested it on his phone. Perfect. Now he could see what was happening to his trash cans. Marcus didn't have to wait long for an answer. The very next night, the camera recorded Patricia Hendricks walking across the street at 2 a.m. She looked around carefully to make sure no one was watching, then opened Marcus's trash cans and dumped everything onto his lawn. She even kicked some of the garbage around to make it look more random. Marcus watched the video 3 times, hardly believing what he was seeing. The president of his homeowners association was sneaking around in the middle of the night to vandalize his property. But Marcus was a careful man. He had learned during his police career that one piece of evidence wasn't always enough. So he waited and watched. Over the next week, the camera recorded Patricia Hendricks vandalizing his property 4 more times. She also recorded her friend, the blonde woman from the HOA meeting, helping her one night. They worked together to tear open trash bags and scatter the contents across his lawn. But the camera caught something even more disturbing. During the day, Patricia would walk by his house with other neighbors and point at the mess, shaking her head and making comments about how some people didn't know how to take care of their property. Marcus saved all the videos on his computer and backed them up to a secure cloud server. His police training had taught him that evidence could disappear, so he always made multiple copies of everything important. The harassment was getting worse in other ways too. Marcus received HOA violation notices almost every day now. His mailbox was the wrong shade of black. His doormat was not regulation size. His house numbers were positioned incorrectly, even though they were in exactly the same place the previous owner had put them. One morning, Marcus woke up to find that someone had spray-painted "Move" in red letters on his garage door. The camera hadn't caught this because it only covered his front yard, and the garage faced the alley behind his house. That afternoon, Marcus was painting over the graffiti when Mr. Johnson from next door came over to talk to him. "This is getting ridiculous," Johnson said quietly. He looked around to make sure no one else could hear him. "My wife and I saw Patricia and some of the other neighbors talking in her driveway last night. They were planning something. What kind of something? Marcus asked. I don't know exactly, but Patricia was saying that nice neighborhoods have ways of dealing with people who don't fit in. Johnson paused. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Some of these people are never going to accept you living here. It doesn't matter that you're a police chief. It doesn't matter that you're a good neighbor. They've made up their minds. Marcus stopped painting and looked at Johnson. What do you think I should do? Johnson was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he finally said. Part of me thinks you should fight this, stand up for yourself, but another part of me worries about what Patricia and her friends might do next. That evening, Marcus called his lieutenant, Dave Rodriguez, to talk about the situation. Chief, this is harassment, Dave said after Marcus explained what had been happening. You've got it all on video. We could arrest Patricia Hendricks tomorrow. I know, Marcus said, but I keep thinking that if I can just be patient, maybe things will get better. Maybe people will come around. Boss, with all due respect, you've been patient for 6 weeks. Things are getting worse, not better. Dave was right, but Marcus wasn't ready to give up yet. He had worked too hard to get to this neighborhood. He wasn't going to let a few bullies drive him out of his own home. The next day was Saturday, and Marcus decided to spend the morning working in his backyard. He had finally cleared out enough space in his garage to start planting the vegetable garden his mother had always wanted him to have. As Marcus worked, he could hear voices in the front yard. He walked around the side of his house and saw Patricia Hendricks standing on his front lawn with 5 other neighbors. They were all looking at his security camera. Excuse me, Marcus said as he approached them. Can I help you with something? Patricia turned around with a fake smile. Mr. Williams, we were just admiring your new camera. Thank you, Marcus said carefully. The thing is, Patricia continued, we've been getting complaints from neighbors about privacy concerns. Marcus looked at the group of people standing on his lawn uninvited and talking about privacy. Privacy concerns? A man Marcus didn't recognize stepped forward. That camera could be recording our children playing in the street. Some parents are worried about their kids being filmed. Marcus kept his voice calm and professional. The camera only records my own property. It can't see the street or anyone else's yard. That's what you say, the blonde woman from the HOA meeting said. But how do we know for sure? You're welcome to look at the angle yourself, Marcus offered. I can show you exactly what it records. That's not the point, Patricia said. Her voice was getting sharper. The point is that cameras make people uncomfortable. They make the neighborhood feel less friendly and more suspicious. Marcus almost laughed out loud at that comment. The neighborhood had been plenty suspicious without any cameras. I have a right to put security cameras on my own property, Marcus said. Actually, Patricia said with a triumphant smile, you don't. Not without HOA approval. She pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to Marcus. It was a copy of the HOA rules, with one section highlighted in yellow. Security cameras, satellite dishes, and other electronic equipment must be approved by the HOA board before installation. Marcus read aloud. He had read through the HOA rules carefully when he moved in, but somehow he had missed this section. I'm sure it was just an oversight, Patricia said sweetly. You can submit an application for approval, and we'll consider it at next month's board meeting. And until then? Marcus asked. Until then, the camera needs to be removed, Patricia said. Marcus looked at the group of neighbors standing on his lawn, demanding that he remove the security equipment that was protecting his home from their vandalism. The situation was so absurd that Marcus had to work hard not to show his anger. I'll submit the application this week, Marcus said. Wonderful, Patricia said, and we'll need the camera removed by tomorrow evening, or we'll have to issue a formal violation notice. After the neighbors left, Marcus sat on his front porch and thought about his situation. He knew exactly why Patricia wanted the camera removed. She couldn't continue vandalizing his property if everything was being recorded. But Marcus also knew that removing the camera would make things worse. Without evidence of what Patricia and her friends were doing, he had no way to protect himself or prove what was happening. That evening, Marcus made a decision. He submitted the application for camera approval, but he didn't remove the camera. If Patricia wanted to issue a violation notice, let her. Marcus was done playing games. He was also done being patient. The next morning, Marcus woke up to find dog waste smeared on his front door and the word "leave" carved into his mailbox post. Marcus watched the security footage from the night before. This time, Patricia Hendricks had brought 3 friends with her. They had worked together to vandalize his property, and the camera had recorded everything. Marcus saved the video and made multiple backup copies. Then he picked up his phone and called Dave Rodriguez. "Dave, I need you to come over here," Marcus said. "Bring a patrol car and your evidence kit. We're making some arrests today." "About time, boss," Dave said. As Marcus waited for his lieutenant to arrive, he looked around at his neighborhood. Children were playing in their yards. People were washing their cars and mowing their lawns. It was a beautiful Saturday morning in Willowbrook Heights. But Marcus now understood that some of his neighbors would never let him enjoy the peace and safety of this place. They were determined to make his life miserable until he gave up and moved away. Well, Marcus Williams hadn't gotten to be the police chief by giving up when things got tough. If Patricia Hendricks and her friends wanted a war, they were about to find out what it was like to fight someone who knew how to win. The battle for Willowbrook Heights was about to become a whole lot more interesting. Marcus was about to call his lieutenant when his phone rang. It was Dave Rodriguez calling him first. "Chief, we've got a problem," Dave said. "I just got a call from the mayor's office. Someone filed a formal complaint against you with the city." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What kind of complaint?" "They're saying you're using your position as police chief to intimidate your neighbors. Something about threatening to arrest people over HOA disputes." "I haven't threatened anyone," Marcus said. "I know that, boss. But the mayor wants to see you first thing Monday morning. He's getting pressure from some city council members." Marcus realized that Patricia Hendricks was smarter than he had thought. She knew that if she could make it look like Marcus was abusing his power as police chief, she could cause serious problems for his career. "Dave, cancel that patrol car," Marcus said. "We need to handle this differently." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his kitchen and thought about his situation. Every time he tried to fight back, Patricia found a way to make him look like the bad guy. She was playing a game and she was very good at it. Marcus decided he needed help from someone who understood games like this. He called his friend Janet Morrison, who worked as a civil rights lawyer in the city. "Marcus, what you're describing is a classic harassment campaign," Janet said after he explained everything. "These people are trying to force you out by making your life miserable. The technical term is constructive eviction. Can they do that? They can try. But you have rights, and more importantly, you have evidence. Those security videos are gold, Marcus. They show a clear pattern of harassment and vandalism. But now they're saying I'm abusing my power as police chief, which is exactly why you need to be smart about how you handle this," Janet said. "Don't use your police powers. Handle this as a private citizen. Let me help you file the right complaints with the right agencies." Marcus felt better after talking to Janet. He had a plan now and he had professional help. But Patricia Hendricks was making plans too. That Sunday evening, Marcus was grilling dinner in his backyard when he heard voices in the front yard. He walked around the side of his house and saw Patricia talking to a man he had never seen before. The man was about 30 years old, white, and wearing what looked like a security guard uniform. He had a badge on his chest and a radio clipped to his belt. "That's him," Marcus heard Patricia say as she pointed toward him. "That's the one who's been causing all the problems." The man looked Marcus up and down. "Are you Marcus Williams?" "Yes," Marcus said. "And you are?" "I'm Officer Peterson with Neighborhood Security," the man said. He puffed out his chest like he was trying to look more important. "We've been getting complaints about your behavior." Marcus almost laughed. "Officer Peterson? What kind of complaints?" "Threatening your neighbors, installing illegal surveillance equipment, intimidating families with children." Marcus looked more closely at the man's uniform and badge. Something didn't look right. The badge was shiny and new, like it had just come out of a package. The uniform didn't fit quite right. "What agency do you work for, Officer Peterson?" Marcus asked. The man hesitated for just a second. Willowbrook Heights Security Services. Marcus had never heard of that company, and he knew every security company that worked in the city. "Can I see your identification, please?" Marcus asked politely. Patricia stepped forward quickly. "He doesn't have to show you anything. You're not in charge here." But the fake officer was already reaching for his wallet. He handed Marcus a plastic ID card that looked like it had been made at home. Marcus examined the card carefully. It had the man's photo and the name Danny Peterson, but everything else about it looked fake. The company name was printed in a basic computer font, and there was no official seal or registration number. "This doesn't look like a real security company ID," Marcus said. "Are you calling me a liar?" Danny Peterson demanded. His voice got louder and more aggressive. Marcus stayed calm. His police training had taught him how to deal with people who were trying to intimidate him. "I'm just asking questions," Marcus said. "If you're a real security officer, you should be licensed by the state. What's your license number?" Danny Peterson's face turned red. He looked at Patricia, who was making small shaking motions with her head. "I don't have to answer your questions," Danny said. "You're the one in trouble here, not me." Marcus was now certain that Danny Peterson was not a real security officer, but he was curious about what Patricia was trying to accomplish with this performance. "What exactly do you want from me?" Marcus asked. Patricia stepped forward again. "We want you to remove that illegal camera, stop harassing your neighbors, and start following the HOA rules like everyone else." "And if I don't?" Danny Peterson puffed out his chest again. "Then we'll have to take further action." "What kind of action?" "Whatever action is necessary to restore peace to this neighborhood," Patricia said mysteriously. After Patricia and the fake officer left, Marcus called Janet Morrison again. "They're escalating," Janet said after Marcus described the encounter. "Bringing in fake security officers is a new level of harassment. This is actually good for our case. It shows how far they're willing to go. Should I report the fake officer to the real police? Not yet. Let's see what they're really planning first. But Marcus, you need to be very careful. These people are getting desperate, and desperate people do stupid things." Marcus spent that evening reviewing all the evidence he had collected. Videos of Patricia vandalizing his property, copies of all the fake HOA violation notices, photos of the graffiti on his garage, documentation of every harassment incident. He also did some research on Danny Peterson and Willowbrook Heights Security Services. There was no such company registered with the state. Danny Peterson had no security license and no law enforcement background that Marcus could find. But Marcus did find something interesting. Danny Peterson was Patricia Hendricks's nephew. He worked at a shopping mall as a security guard, but he had been written up several times for pretending to have more authority than he actually had. Marcus was putting together a clear picture of what was happening. Patricia Hendricks was running an organized campaign to force him out of the neighborhood. She was willing to break the law to do it, and she was bringing in family members to help her. The next morning, Marcus woke up to find another note on his door. This one was different from the others. It wasn't on HOA letterhead and it wasn't signed. "You have 48 hours to leave Willowbrook Heights," the note said. "If you don't leave voluntarily, we will make you leave. This is your final warning." Marcus photographed the note and added it to his evidence file. Then he called Janet Morrison and Dave Rodriguez. "This is a direct threat," Janet said. "We need to take this to the FBI. This has moved beyond local harassment into federal civil rights violation territory." "I agree," Dave said. "Boss, these people are threatening you. We need to take this seriously." But Marcus had a different idea. "I want to see what they're planning," he said. "If we move too fast, we might not catch everyone involved. Let's give them enough rope to hang themselves." "Marcus, that's dangerous," Janet warned. "What if they actually try to hurt you?" "They won't hurt me," Marcus said. "They're bullies, not criminals. They think they can scare me into leaving. When they find out they can't, they'll try something stupid and we'll catch them in the act." Marcus was wrong about one thing, though. Patricia Hendricks and her friends were about to try something much more stupid than he had imagined. That evening, Patricia was in her living room making phone calls to other neighbors. She had a list of names and was checking off each person she called. "We need everyone's help tomorrow night," she said to each caller. "This is our last chance to solve the problem peacefully." By the end of the evening, Patricia had recruited 8 neighbors to help with her plan. She also called her nephew Danny and his friend Mike, who also worked mall security. "Are you sure this will work?" Danny asked when Patricia explained what she wanted him to do. "Trust me," Patricia said. "Once word gets around the neighborhood about what happened, he'll be too embarrassed to stay. No one will want to live next to someone who got arrested in their own driveway." "But what if he fights back?" Mike asked. Patricia laughed. "He won't fight back. He's trying to be respectable. He won't want to cause a scene in front of all the neighbors." Patricia Hendricks had spent weeks planning her campaign against Marcus Williams. She had studied his behavior and decided he was the kind of person who would always try to take the high road. She was counting on his desire to be a good neighbor to keep him from fighting back too hard. But Patricia had made a serious mistake. In her planning, she had forgotten that Marcus Williams wasn't just a neighbor trying to fit in. He was the police chief. And he was about to remind everyone in Willowbrook Heights exactly what that meant. Saturday afternoon was perfect for washing cars. The sun was shining, there was a gentle breeze, and Marcus had the day off from work. He set up his bucket and hose in the driveway and started cleaning his black sedan. As Marcus worked, he noticed more neighbors than usual were outside. Mrs. Chen was watering her flowers, but she kept glancing in his direction. The teenagers who lived 2 houses down were sitting on their front porch, which was unusual for a Saturday afternoon. Even Mr. Peterson, who normally stayed inside during the day, was puttering around in his front yard. Marcus didn't think much of it. He was focused on getting the soap off his car before it dried in the sun. At exactly 3 o'clock, a white car with amateur police markings pulled up to the curb in front of Marcus's house. The car looked official at first glance, but Marcus could see that the decals were crooked, and the light bar on top was held on with zip ties. Danny Peterson got out of the driver's side wearing a police-style uniform that was too big for him. His fake badge was pinned to his chest, and he had a pair of handcuffs hanging from his belt. Another young white man got out of the passenger side. He was wearing a similar uniform and trying to look official. Marcus recognized the second man as Mike Sullivan, who worked with Danny at the shopping mall. Marcus had run background checks on both men after their first encounter with Patricia. "Marcus Williams," Danny called out in a loud voice. "You're under arrest." Marcus straightened up from washing his car and looked at the 2 fake officers. Around the neighborhood, he could see curtains moving in windows and neighbors stepping out onto their porches to watch. "Under arrest for what?" Marcus asked calmly. "Violations of HOA regulations, disturbing the peace, and threatening your neighbors," Danny announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Mike stepped forward with handcuffs in his hand. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Marcus didn't move. He was trained to assess situations quickly, and he could see exactly what was happening. Patricia Hendricks was standing across the street with her phone out, recording everything. Several other neighbors were also recording. They wanted to capture Marcus being humiliated and arrested in front of the whole neighborhood. "Let me see. Your police identification," Marcus said. Danny puffed out his chest. "I already showed you my ID. Now turn around so we can arrest you." "That wasn't police identification," Marcus said. "That was a fake security company card. If you're real police officers, show me your badges and your arrest warrant." Mike looked nervous, but Danny was getting more aggressive. "We don't need a warrant for citizens' arrests," Danny said. "You've been breaking the law and we're here to stop you." Marcus almost smiled. These 2 had no idea what they were getting themselves into. "What laws have I broken?" Marcus asked. "HOA violations are civil infractions that can lead to criminal charges," Danny said. He sounded like he had practiced this speech. "You've also been threatening your neighbors and refusing to comply with legal orders." A small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the street to watch the show. Patricia Hendricks was still recording everything, and Marcus could see her smiling with satisfaction. "Turn around now, or we'll have to use force," Mike said, trying to sound tough. Marcus looked at the 2 young men in their fake uniforms. They had no real authority, no real training, and no idea who they were dealing with. But they did have handcuffs and the support of several neighbors who wanted to see Marcus humiliated. "Before you try to arrest me," Marcus said in his calm, professional voice. There's something you should know about me. He reached slowly into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. Danny and Mike tensed up, thinking Marcus might be reaching for a weapon. Marcus opened his wallet and pulled out his official police chief badge and credentials. He held them up so everyone could see clearly. I'm Police Chief Marcus Williams, he announced in a voice loud enough to carry across the street. I'm the chief of police for this entire city. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Danny Peterson's face went completely white. Mike Sullivan took several steps backward. Patricia Hendricks dropped her phone. You two are impersonating police. Officers, Marcus continued in the same calm, authoritative voice. That's a federal crime punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Danny was now shaking visibly. We weren't impersonating police. We're security officers. Security officers don't make arrests, Marcus said. Security officers don't carry handcuffs. Security officers don't wear police-style uniforms or drive cars made to look like police vehicles. Marcus looked around at all the neighbors who were watching. Most of them looked shocked and embarrassed. A few were starting to back away from the scene. You're also attempting to unlawfully detain a law enforcement officer, Marcus continued. That's another felony. Mike was now frantically trying to take off the handcuffs that were hanging from his belt. We didn't know, he stammered. Patricia said you were just causing trouble in the neighborhood. Marcus looked across the street at Patricia Hendricks, who was now trying to hide behind her car. Mrs. Hendricks, Marcus called out. Would you come over here, please? Patricia looked like she wanted to run into her house, but too many people were watching. She walked slowly across the street with her head down. Did you tell these men that I was a criminal who needed to be arrested? Marcus asked. Patricia's voice was barely above a whisper. I thought you were causing problems. Did you know that these men are not real police officers? Patricia didn't answer. Did you help them plan this fake arrest? Still no answer. Marcus looked around at all the neighbors who had gathered to watch his humiliation. Now they were witnessing something completely different. I want everyone to understand what just happened here, Marcus said in his chief of police voice. These two men committed multiple felonies in front of dozens of witnesses. They impersonated police officers, attempted to unlawfully detain a citizen, and conspired to deprive someone of their civil rights. Danny Peterson was now crying. Please, Chief Williams, we're sorry. We made a mistake. Patricia told us you were a bad guy who needed to be scared into moving away. Marcus looked at the young man with a mixture of anger and pity. You made more than a mistake, son. You committed serious crimes because someone convinced you to hate a person you'd never even met. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Lieutenant Rodriguez, he said when Dave answered. I need 2 patrol cars at my house immediately. I have suspects in custody for impersonating police officers and conspiracy. On our way, Chief, Dave replied. Marcus looked around at the crowd of neighbors one more time. I moved to this neighborhood because I wanted to live somewhere peaceful and safe, he said. I've tried to be a good neighbor. I've followed every rule and been respectful to everyone I've met. He paused and looked directly at Patricia Hendricks. But some of you decided I didn't belong here before you even knew who I was or what I did for a living. You harassed me, vandalized my property, and now you've tried to have me illegally arrested. The sound of sirens was getting closer. I've spent my entire career protecting people and upholding the law, Marcus continued. I've dedicated my life to making communities safer. And this is how some of you chose to welcome me to your community. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb. 4 uniformed officers got out and approached the scene. Officers, Marcus said, I need you to arrest these 2 men for impersonating police officers, attempted unlawful detention, and conspiracy. I also need you to arrest Patricia Hendricks as a co-conspirator. As the real police officers put handcuffs on Danny Peterson, Mike Sullivan, and Patricia Hendricks, the crowd of neighbors began to disperse. Many of them looked ashamed and embarrassed, but not all of them. Marcus noticed that a few neighbors were shaking their heads and muttering to each other. They looked angry, but not at Patricia and her fake police officers. They looked angry at Marcus for fighting back. Marcus realized that his troubles in Willowbrook Heights were far from over. Patricia Hendricks might be going to jail, but the attitudes that had created this situation were still alive and well in some of his neighbors. As the patrol cars drove away with their prisoners, Marcus stood in his driveway holding his garden hose. His car was still covered with soap and he had a neighborhood barbecue to finish preparing for. But first he had some phone calls to make. The mayor needed to know what had happened. The FBI needed to be notified about the civil rights violations. And Marcus needed to decide what to do about the neighbors who were still watching him from their windows with hate in their eyes. The battle for Willowbrook Heights had just taken a dramatic turn, but Marcus knew it wasn't over yet. The arrest of Patricia Hendricks and the two fake police officers created a storm that Marcus hadn't expected. Within 2 hours, news vans were parked on Pine Street, and reporters were knocking on doors throughout Willowbrook Heights. Marcus stood at his front window watching the chaos outside. His phone had been ringing nonstop with calls from reporters, city officials, and neighbors he had never met before, who wanted to apologize. "Chief Williams, this is incredible," said Channel 7 news reporter Sarah Martinez when she caught up with Marcus in his driveway. "Can you tell us what it was like to have fake police officers try to arrest the real police chief?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. Everything he said would be broadcast across the city, and he wanted to make sure his message was clear. "What happened today wasn't really about me," Marcus said. "It was about what happens when people make assumptions about their neighbors based on race instead of getting to know them as individuals." "Are you saying this was a racially motivated attack?" "I'm saying that some people in this neighborhood decided I didn't belong here before they knew anything about me, except the color of my skin," Marcus replied. "When I moved in, I was just a new neighbor who wanted to be part of the community. But some people saw me as a threat that needed to be eliminated." The reporter asked several more questions, but Marcus kept his answers focused on the larger issues of prejudice and community acceptance, rather than attacking his neighbors personally. That evening, Marcus's doorbell rang. He opened it to find Mr. and Mrs. Johnson from next door, along with Mr. Peterson and several other neighbors he had met during his first week in the neighborhood. "Chief Williams," Mrs. Johnson said, "we wanted to come over and apologize. We should have stood up for you weeks ago when all this harassment started. We were embarrassed by what some of our neighbors were doing," added Mr. Peterson. "But we were also scared of Patricia and her friends. They made it clear that anyone who supported you would become a target too." Marcus invited the group into his living room. There were 8 neighbors total, and they all looked genuinely upset about what had happened. "We had no idea Patricia was planning something this extreme," said Mrs. Chen. "We knew she was filing those fake HOA complaints, but we never thought she would go this far." "Did you know the men who tried to arrest me weren't real police officers?" Marcus asked. The neighbors looked at each other uncomfortably. "We suspected something wasn't right," admitted Tom Rodriguez from the city planning department. "Real police officers don't usually announce arrests so loudly or put on such a big show. But we didn't want to get involved." Marcus nodded. He understood why his neighbors had been afraid to speak up, but he was disappointed that none of them had tried to warn him about what Patricia was planning. "What happens now?" asked Mrs. Johnson. "Will Patricia and those men go to prison?" "That depends on what the prosecutor decides to do," Marcus said. "Impersonating a police officer is a serious crime. So is conspiracy to deprive someone of their civil rights. They could face several years in prison if they're convicted." The neighbors seemed shocked by this news. Marcus realized that many people didn't understand how serious Patricia's actions had been. "We need to elect a new HOA board," said Mr. Peterson. "Patricia and her friends can't be allowed to represent this neighborhood anymore." "I'd like to nominate you, Chief Williams," said Mrs. Chen. "You'd be perfect for the HOA board." Marcus was surprised by the suggestion. "I appreciate that, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. I think the neighborhood needs some time to heal first." Over the next week, the story of the fake arrest continued to dominate local news. Patricia Hendricks, Danny Peterson, and Mike Sullivan were charged with multiple felonies and released on bail pending trial. But the story had also attracted national attention. Cable news shows were discussing the case as an example of racial harassment in American neighborhoods. Civil rights organizations were calling for federal hate crime charges. Marcus found himself at the center of a much bigger conversation than he had ever intended to start. He received hundreds of emails and letters from people across the country who had experienced similar harassment in their own neighborhoods. The attention wasn't all positive. Marcus also received angry messages from people who thought he was playing the race card or trying to get special treatment because he was a police officer. Some of his neighbors in Willowbrook Heights were also unhappy with all the media attention. A few of them blamed Marcus for bringing negative publicity to their neighborhood. If he had just moved away quietly, none of this would have happened, Marcus overheard one neighbor saying to another during his evening walk. "Now everyone thinks we're all racists," replied the other neighbor. "Our property values are going to suffer." Marcus realized that the dramatic arrest had solved one problem, but created others. Patricia Hendricks and her most active supporters were gone, but the underlying attitudes that had created the situation were still present in some of his neighbors. 2 weeks after the arrest, Marcus received a visit from FBI agent Lisa Park, who was investigating the civil rights aspects of the case. "Chief Williams, we've reviewed all the evidence you collected over the past 2 months," Agent Park said. "You did an excellent job documenting the harassment. This is one of the clearest cases of housing discrimination I've seen." "What happens next?" Marcus asked. "We're recommending federal charges against Mrs. Hendricks for conspiracy to violate your civil rights under color of law. The fake police officer angle makes this a federal case." Agent Park paused before continuing. "But I have to warn you, Chief Williams, cases like this can drag on for years, and sometimes the publicity makes things worse for the victim, not better. Are you prepared for what might come next?" Marcus thought about the question carefully. He had already received death threats from strangers who saw him as a symbol of something they hated. Some of his fellow police chiefs in other cities had called to warn him that his case was being used by people with political agendas. "Agent Park, I didn't ask for any of this," Marcus said finally. "I just wanted to live peacefully in my own neighborhood. But if my case can help other people who are facing similar harassment, then I'm willing to see it through." The next morning, Marcus woke up to find his front yard covered with flowers, cards, and signs of support. Neighbors from other parts of the city had come during the night to show their solidarity. "Thank you for standing up for all of us," read one card. "Your courage gives us hope," said another. Marcus walked through his front yard reading the messages and looking at the flowers. Children in the neighborhood were riding their bikes past his house, waving and calling out, "Good morning, Chief Williams." For the first time since moving to Willowbrook Heights, Marcus felt like he might actually belong there. But his phone was ringing again. Another reporter wanting an interview. Another neighbor wanting to apologize. Another civil rights organization wanting him to speak at their event. Marcus realized that his quiet life in his peaceful neighborhood was never going to be the same. The fake arrest had changed everything, not just for him, but for his entire community. As he stood in his front yard surrounded by flowers and messages of support, Marcus wondered if this was really victory or just the beginning of a different kind of battle. The war for Willowbrook Heights was over, but Marcus Williams had become a symbol in a much larger war that was happening all across America. Whether he wanted it or not, his fight for a place in his neighborhood had become part of the ongoing fight for racial justice and equal treatment in American communities. And that fight was far from over. 6 months after the fake arrest that shocked Willowbrook Heights, Marcus Williams was finally living the peaceful life he had always wanted. The legal battles were over, the media attention had died down, and his neighborhood had transformed into something better than he had ever imagined possible. Patricia Hendricks had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy to violate civil rights and obstruction of justice. Danny Peterson and Mike Sullivan received 12 months each for impersonating police officers and unlawful detention. The federal judge who sentenced them called their actions a shameful example of how prejudice can lead ordinary people to commit serious crimes. But the real change in Willowbrook Heights wasn't about the people who went to prison. It was about the people who stayed and decided to do better. The new HOA board, elected 3 months after Patricia's arrest, was completely different from the old one. Tom Rodriguez from the city planning department was the new president. Mrs. Johnson was the treasurer. Mr. Peterson was the secretary. The board included neighbors of different races, ages, and backgrounds, and their first official act was to apologize publicly to Marcus for the harassment he had endured. The Willowbrook Heights community failed to live up to its own values. The new board statement read, "We are committed to making sure that every resident feels welcome and valued, regardless of their race, religion, or background." The board also voted to remove all the petty HOA rules that Patricia had used to harass Marcus. The new guidelines were focused on genuinely important issues like property maintenance and community safety, not on controlling every detail of how people lived their lives. Marcus had been asked to join the new HOA board, but he politely declined. He wanted to be just a regular neighbor, not a community leader. He had spent enough of his life fighting battles. Now he wanted to focus on the simple pleasures of home ownership, like the vegetable garden he had finally planted in his backyard. His mother had visited for the first time 2 weeks ago, and she had cried when she saw the tomatoes and peppers growing in neat rows behind his house. "This is what I always dreamed of for you," she had told him as they sat on his back porch drinking lemonade. "A place where you can put down roots and watch things grow." The neighborhood children had also discovered that Chief Williams was much more interesting than they had originally thought. Word had gotten around that he knew everything about police cars and detective work, and soon Marcus found himself being asked to judge science fair projects and speak at school career days. "Chief Williams, is it true you caught bad guys when you were a regular police officer?" 8-year-old Tommy Johnson had asked during a recent visit to the elementary school. "I helped catch some bad guys," Marcus had replied, "but mostly I tried to help people solve their problems before they became big enough to need catching." The attention from Marcus's case had also brought positive changes to the broader community. The city council had passed new ordinances against housing discrimination, and the police department had created a new unit specifically focused on investigating civil rights violations. Marcus had been invited to speak at conferences around the country about his experience, but he only accepted invitations from groups that were genuinely working to improve community relations. He turned down requests from political organizations and media outlets that wanted to use his story to promote their own agendas. This was never about politics, Marcus told a conference of police chiefs in Atlanta. This was about basic human decency, about treating your neighbors the way you want to be treated. The most meaningful change, though, was in his daily life in Willowbrook Heights. Marcus now knew the names of all his neighbors, including the children and the dogs. People waved to him when he walked down the street. His phone number was on the emergency contact list for 3 different neighbors who traveled frequently and wanted someone reliable to keep an eye on their houses. Last month, the neighborhood had thrown a block party to celebrate the first anniversary of Marcus moving to Pine Street. The party was held in Marcus's front yard, and nearly every family in the neighborhood attended. "When Chief Williams first moved here, some of us weren't as welcoming as we should have been," Mr. Peterson had said during a speech at the party. "We learned that assumptions based on appearance can lead to terrible mistakes, but we also learned that communities can change and grow and become better than they were." Mrs. Chen had stood up and added, "Chief Williams could have moved away when things got difficult. He could have given up on our neighborhood, but he stayed and fought for his right to be here. In doing that, he made all of us better neighbors." Even more important to Marcus than the public recognition was the private friendships he had developed. The Johnsons invited him over for dinner every few weeks. Mrs. Chen brought him vegetables from her garden. Mr. Peterson had become his regular walking partner in the evenings. "You know what's funny?" Mr. Peterson had said during one of their walks. "Patricia spent so much time worrying about the wrong kind of people moving into the neighborhood that she never realized she was the wrong kind of person herself." Marcus had also found romance in an unexpected place. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the emergency room physician who had treated Mike Sullivan when he had a panic attack during his arrest, had called Marcus a few months later to ask if he would speak to her hospital staff about dealing with civil rights issues in healthcare. One speaking engagement had led to coffee had led to dinner, and dinner had led to a relationship that was now serious enough that Sarah was keeping a toothbrush at Marcus's house. "I never thought I'd fall in love with someone I met through a fake arrest," Sarah had joked during their first date. "I never thought I'd find love in Willowbrook Heights at all," Marcus had replied. This morning, as Marcus sat on his front porch drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just 1 year. The house that had once felt like a battleground now felt like home. The neighborhood that had once been hostile now felt like a real community. His phone buzzed with a text message from his lieutenant. "Chief, the new rookie class wants to know if you'll speak at their graduation about community policing." Marcus typed back, "Of course, it would be my honor." As Marcus prepared to go inside and get ready for work, he noticed a moving truck parked in front of the house that Patricia Hendricks used to own. A young Latino family was unloading boxes and furniture, and their 2 small children were running around the front yard exploring their new home. Marcus walked across the street to introduce himself. "Good morning," he said to the man who appeared to be the father. "I'm Marcus Williams. I live across the street. Welcome to Willowbrook Heights." The man smiled and shook Marcus's hand. "Thank you. I'm Roberto Martinez. This is my wife Elena, and our children Sophia and Miguel. If you need anything or have any questions about the neighborhood, please don't hesitate to ask," Marcus said. "We have a great community here." As Marcus walked back to his house, he thought about how different this welcome was from the one he had received a year ago. Roberto Martinez would face some of the same challenges that any new neighbor faces, but he wouldn't face the harassment and discrimination that Marcus had endured. By 10 o'clock that morning, Marcus noticed that several neighbors had already stopped by to welcome the Martinez family. Mrs. Johnson brought over a plate of cookies. Mr. Peterson helped Roberto carry a heavy dresser into the house. Mrs. Chen was in the front yard playing with little Sophia and Miguel. This was what Marcus had always imagined his neighborhood would be like. People helping each other, children playing safely in their yards, and neighbors who genuinely cared about each other's well-being. That evening, Marcus was watering his vegetable garden when Roberto Martinez walked over with a cold beer in each hand. "I wanted to thank you for the warm welcome this morning," Roberto said, handing Marcus one of the beers. "Elena and I were nervous about moving to a new neighborhood, but everyone has been so friendly. Willowbrook Heights is a good place to live," Marcus said. "It took us a while to figure that out, but we got there eventually." Roberto looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" Marcus realized that Roberto probably didn't know about the events that had happened in his new neighborhood a year ago. The story had been big news locally, but people move on and forget. "Let's just say that this neighborhood has learned some important lessons about how to treat new residents," Marcus said with a smile. As the 2 men stood in Marcus's backyard, drinking their beers and watching the sunset, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because he had won a battle or proven a point, but because he had found what he had been looking for all along. A place to call home, a community where people looked out for each other, a neighborhood where children could play safely and families could build good lives together. The house on Pine Street had cost Marcus more than just money. It had cost him months of stress, harassment, and public attention he had never wanted. It had cost him his privacy and his simple dream of living quietly, but it had also given him something he hadn't expected. It had shown him that change was possible, that communities could grow and learn from their mistakes.